Okay, Dewada, man, you little fuck up. You want to talk about the native people of this country? You want to talk about the Dene, the Lenape, the Chihuahuas, the Seminoles? No, divinity is not talking about something that is made up by the Mexican movement, okay? You asshole. I know that this is going to be hard for you to understand because your peewit brain doesn't permit certain information in. And since you're a crypto-racist, I know that you already have a pretty set idea of what's in your mind in terms of the native people of this country, and indeed the peoples that are not white in other countries. But what Divinity is saying is absolutely correct. In many, many Native American societies, from the Iroquois to the Apache, all of these people were what we would describe in some form as egalitarian, particularly among people like the Lakota, or among the Chihuahuas, the Shawnee. Men and women were looked at as individuals that all contributed to the well-being of the tribe, of the people. There were different councils that sat within these tribes. You had a war council and you had a domestic civil council. And men and women would sit, in many cases, on both, particularly in the Iroquois, where the women actually controlled things. And the Lakota. There were Mayan queens. In fact, the most famous ruler in Mayan history, Pakal the Great's mother, ruled in his stead until he was well enough and old enough to take the throne, and she ruled very well. This is not a Mexican movement thing. In this comment, to speak of the people in the Western Hemisphere pre-1495 as one conglomerate as to the condition and state of women as a group is painting a rather simple and almost racist picture. Where are you getting this from? The Mexican movement. Racist picture? Let me give you something a little bit in the way of knowledge, Dewada, man. The people on this continent were fine before we got here. They were getting along perfectly well. I know that an idiot like you associates the establishment of society in terms of Western thought. You and your idiotic moral philosophy bent. The idea that we have to proceed forward in the way that you think we have to proceed forward, according to Western views of success. But I can tell you right now, those people were fine before we got here. They had civilization. They had complex history. That's what the picture up on the back of this video is right now. And this is why I've taken the time to essentially address your stupid bullshit. Because this is dumb. All throughout this, people will be seeing earthworks created by the Hopewell, the Adena, the Mississippians, and the Fort Ancient. These were sophisticated people. Now, Mississippians had a rather stratified society that appeared to be patriarchal in nature, but that is one of the few. And these things change over time. But largely the Native Americans were mostly egalitarian people, even if you might have had one or two tribes that weren't. There was no concept that a woman's word was not worthwhile because she was a woman. In fact, many Native Americans looked upon this as the woman sees from a different viewpoint. That is why we ask her opinion. As for being teachers and medicine people, and taking part in government and civic activity, all absolutely true also. There was no discrimination based on gender when it came to understanding the use of medicinal herbs or treatment of disease. In fact, even in the most primitive primate societies, such as the bonobos and chimpanzees, we find that the tool makers tend to be the females. This is not something that is in dispute. In other words, this ridiculous viewpoint that you have, which is frankly not only racist in and of itself, but frankly it's this misogynistic view that you hide very well, but you're not fooling me. You've never been able to fool me. I know what you're all about. And you're just showing it even more and more every time we attack you and your MRA buddies. You guys want to turn back the clock to the 50s when morality and ethics reigned supreme. Did it? Ask if you were a woman in the 50s and you needed to get an abortion, perhaps because your father had raped you and you were now carrying his child. Ask how good life was then. Ask someone who's black, if you can stand to. Ask someone who was of African American descent how much justice was in this country in the 50s. Ask how good it was for them. Ask the native people how good life is in this country, if you can find one. We've made them kind of scarce to Waterman. I don't know if you realize that. You know what's even worse? For years, the people of the Black Mesa, the Navajo Nation, or the Dene, the people as they call themselves, and the Hopi, set on one of the biggest deposits of energy in the world. And they essentially got screwed out of all their money by the U.S. government. The Department of Indian Affairs. They gave them a ridiculously cheap contract to mine the coal. They started to siphon off all of their water resources so that they could sluice this coal to factories in California and energy production areas in California. This was Peabody coal, by the way, Peabody mining. And they would do it using water to create this slurry, coal slurry, and they would use it to ship it because it was cheaper. It was cheaper to send it down this 230-odd mile pipeline to get it to the energy factories, and then they would take it out of the water, and then they would use it to produce energy. So essentially, the Navajo, the Dene, and the Hopi people, who are the ancestors of the ancestral Pueblo, the people who built Chaco Canyon, also will be up on the background of this video. These people supply energy for all the desert Southwest for the most part. Now they want to start moving to clean energy. Now they want to reclaim the earth. As they put it, they're tired of people raping their mother. That's how they see it. But big business and other things are standing in their way. That's progress, though, right, Waterman? Do you agree with that? Do you agree that the native people of this country shouldn't be allowed to determine their own energy efficiency, their own destiny? All of Las Vegas is one big monument to human gratuity. It is literally the edifice of consumption. And the energy taken from the Black Mesa region helps to charge it. Now that is highly, highly amusing and sad in a number of ways, because the power lines that run the energy to Nevada go right through all of the Dene lands and the Hopi lands, often in the shadow of communities who can't get electricity. Their power is being used to supply our wealth. Do you find that fair? Do you think that's good? Do you think that's moral? Do you think that that's something that should be done? You don't understand this shit, first of all. You don't understand the history of the people of this country. You don't understand what they did, how they did it, and the continuing saga of how we take it from them. You are comfortable in your life. You have no real problems to speak of that we can see. And you sit in judgment of others based on your high moral standing. But the truth is, you're an asshole. You're an asshole who sits in a hermetically sealed compartment who doesn't understand these things. And then has the nerve to accuse divinity of somehow painting with too broad a brush? Really? So when you say that everything's a leftist conspiracy created by Franz Boas and Margaret Mead, that's not painting with a broad brush? That they sought to undermine man's role, the real role. You just want to turn everything back to the 50s, which wasn't a good time for a lot of people. It was a good time to be a white male. But those days are done. And just because you can't wrap it around your head that anyone could live differently than what you live, don't put that on us. Don't put that on her. Don't put that on the native people of this country. Up at Fort Recovery, there's a tree. And buried beneath this tree is a fallen Native American soldier who was killed during the battle there. There's an inscription there in the language of the Shiwanes. It roughly translates to, "Be good and kind to all." It's the kind of message you see echoed over and over again in the sentiments of the native people. It was the way that they lived, trying to leave each other alone, trying not to impose on others. And even when conflict erupted, not letting it go on for too long. There were all kinds of ways to diffuse conflict. In sharp contrast, the typical saying that you would hear come out of the West would be something like, quid desideret pacem perperet bellum. I think I said that right. Let he who desires peace prepare for war. It's two very, very different ways of looking at things. Which one do you think is better? Live in peace and love one another? Or he who desires peace prepare for war? Because that's a legacy we've got to deal with. And it doesn't help when we've got to deal with some jackoff like you. I don't give a damn what you think in terms of being an MRA. The movement is about hatred of women. It's not about protecting men's rights, which aren't really under that much of an assault. And for all of your complaining and bullshit, the radical feminists have yet to run up any kind of a body count like you guys have. Or was David Koresh not someone of the traditional thinking who let, how many, 70 people die with him in the Branch Davidian compound? Jim Jones was a good guy. Jim Jones, this moral pillar of the community, holy man. Good guy, though, huh? What about Paul Schaefer, Nazi war criminal who established a commune in Chile where he tortured and murdered people? He believed in good old-fashioned Western views, Western philosophy, Western ideas of concepts of advancement and of progress. What about Andreas Breivik, who was pretty clear misogynist in his own right? Or the guy who walked into that Polytechnique school up there in French Canada, in Quebec, I believe it was, and gunned down 14 women because he said they were feminists. Those are real lives lost. And they had families, they probably had children, brothers, mothers, sons. You name it, they were there. All because you jackoffs are fearful of vaginas. And that's all that it comes down to, in my opinion. Why don't we make a distinction among MRAs? Because there's no reason to at this point. No one has given us call to do so. But as a token of clearing things up, I am no longer going to call you people MRAs. What I am going to call you is hyper-masculinists. Men who delude themselves into believing that ideas of masculinity are under assault constantly when they're not. People who are frankly deluded into believing the conspiracy of feminism everywhere, based on what? All of you circle jerking on voiceformen.com. Because that's what's going on. The echo chamber that causes this bullshit is your fault. And it is the fault of all these MRAs. And as long as it continues to be perpetrated, somebody is going to get hurt again. And this already happened. Or did you think those statistics that the CDC came up with and the World Health Organization come up with, are those skewered statistics? Are those statistics made up through a feminist conspiracy? You tell us. because that's very convenient for all of you.